She shivered in the November cold. It wasn't the sort of night to be touting for business. By right she should be tucked up in a warm bed, but chance would be a fine thing, she thought with increasing bitterness. She stared out into the driving rain from her customary doorway in Vinegar Alley and sneezed. Her cold had lingered so long now she was convinced it was to be the death of her. She wished Charles hadn't stopped visiting her. When he had been her sole client, she had no need to go wandering the winter streets for custom. She had stayed inside her warm, well-appointed little room and awaited his pleasure. He had come to see her at least twice a week and paid her handsomely for the privilege. But after she had the baby, little Mary Josephine, he hadn't come any more. And because he hadn't come, she had to go back on the street in order to feed and clothe her child. His child. She sighed as she remembered. Charles had once brought her little gifts, anything she'd wanted. She had only to ask him. He had treated her with affection and respect, as if she was a proper lady. She remembered his handsome face, his kind almond-coloured eyes, and the moustache which used to tickle her every time he kissed her. She had loved the feel of the soft hairs against her lips. She had been stupid to think Charles had really loved her. But men were experienced liars. She had found that out soon enough. He had never loved her. Otherwise he wouldn't have deserted her. Her lovely baby had been born at the Bethnal Green brothel, where she had worked under the care of Mrs. Cleverly. No doctor on hand, of course. It would probably have been better if the baby had died. But it hadn't. So she had been thrown out of the brothel, baby and all, and left to fend for herself. Luckily, she had a strong constitution and had survived against all the odds, getting by on her wits and her trade. She thought back over her pitiful life as she stood there in the shelter of a doorway. There was a time, not so long ago, when Lily Martin hadn't cared if she lived or died. But then she had met Mrs. Cleverly, which had turned out a mixed blessing at best. She had been only 15, left an orphan after the death of her mother. She hated that woman now. But then she had been grateful to her, for if she hadn't met her, she would surely have starved. It was while she was being groomed by the old witch that she had been introduced to the man she had only ever known as Charles. His last name was shrouded in mystery, but even if she had known it, it would have done her no good. If she had been able to find out where he lived, there would have been no point in going there either. She knew that. She had learned a lot in the past 5 years. Now she was back where she'd started, she realised, as she stepped out of the alley and turned the corner. She was on the very same street where Mrs. Cleverly had found her what seemed a lifetime ago. But this time there was no hope of rescue. So she decided to wait just a bit longer in the hope someone would turn up. As she was thinking this, a shadow crossed her path. "Hello, mister," she said with an effort at a come-hither smile. "Looking for a good time?" "Hello, my dear. Yes. May I?" Blimey, she thought. May he? Whoever heard the like? May you what? "May I have the pleasure?" She squinted up at the figure who she could see was wearing a top hat, making him a toff in her book. She continued to stare at the black mass, which was all she could see of his face. Gradually she began to discern his features as the light from the gas lamp nearby cast its muted glow over him. It could have been a trick of that light, but he reminded her a little of Charles.